and welcome back, and today we're going to be looking at surveillance on the Asustor NAS platform. Today we're going to be looking at Surveillance Center from Asustor on the Lockastor 4. We're going to be looking at it in three very important ways. The first way, we're going to be looking at this desktop PC experience, as you can probably see here on screen, and the sound is almost certainly out of sync from what you can see here on screen. We're then going to be switching over to a mobile phone desktop to show you guys the surveillance app, and then lastly we're going to be checking out the surveillance application on a monitor just behind the camera there, where we're going to show the HDMI interface as well. So first thing we're going to do is switch over, for me at least, to this laptop screen. So this will probably be one of the few times I look at the camera there, and we can take a look at this user interface. Now, move the mic back in. When you access your Asustor NAS from the desktop here, when you install the application, it's available here, the Surveillance Center application, it will invite you to download the client application for PC in my case. Once you download that application, it's available here, and installing cameras is actually pretty straightforward. Again, adding cameras, you just go straight into the settings menu, and from here you can find cameras on your local area network, you can edit existing cameras, and do more of those settings. Now, let's address the elephant in the room straight away. This application, for me personally, is not quite as polished as some of the applications I have seen out there. It's very, very good, but there's no arguing it does feel a little dated. Some of the icons and a lot of the way things are being done remind me of sat-navs a few generations ago, where the icons could do with a refresh. I think there could be an extra little lick of paint on a number of areas of this application. It still does a very, very good job, and as a surveillance application that's included inside the purchase of your Asustor NAS, it's still very, very good. But it's just, I think it needs a little bit more to make it compete with some of the big gun surveillance applications out there. That said, a lot of the key services are there. You've got the ability of creating privileges for your individual users, create extra users for surveillance needs for those of you that are going to have an admin, a few ancillary management workers that have got access but can't really delete anything. Notifications, of course, related to if you've got motion detection and some of the features and functionality that are factored into your cameras that you choose to use. I personally quite like using Reolink cameras for kind of SMB kind of stuff. That's what I recommend for people. Some of the Ancare stuff at the bottom end there, very, very affordable products. And right at the top end, you've of course got some of the big ones in Access. Now, some of the alerts, of course, can be done via email, notifications to connected users to the Asustor NAS, and even SMS in supported areas. Event rules and detection is when you want to set when X happens, and Y is the parameter, then Z is the conclusion. You can add different rules and parameters quite easily, and of course some of them are quite straightforward, such as movement detection triggered by the camera, and then of course you can have other ones that are far more critical, such as cameras not working or storage being full. They can all be changed and edited in those settings. Maps, of course, you can upload emaps, and if you do have an emap of your local home or business environment, you can upload that and then position connected cameras to areas on that map, so you can come up with a 3D top-down grid of where the cameras are, and therefore have a better understanding of what's being triggered, how and where, and the effects of how to follow through when alerts have been triggered. Licensing control is the ability to add more licenses, i.e. more cameras to your environment. You can see that we've got 4 channels open on this system, so you've got 4 cameras able to be added on day 1, and then of course you can add more later. And of course the power of the NAS you choose to use will factor into the number of cameras you can have. Mounting recordings is if you want to add external storage areas, either locally or externally, so the system can utilize those for recordings. There's lots of different options there. Login portal, for this we don't really want to log out, but that would take us to it. And that's if you want to sign out and make sure when you're done it can happen. And of course you can set that to be time managed. CMS, content management systems, or when you want to make sure, if you have multiple sites being monitored and you need a centralized recording area, you can bolt them on here, or vice versa. Advanced settings, as one might expect, are where the slightly more detailed affected settings are located, the ones where you might want to change how the recordings happen and therefore the amount of capacity and storage they take. And again, there's lots of settings here you can alter, but you can also change the quota, and the quota will be ultimately how much storage space there is and what happens when it's full. So in the case of these cameras, I've set it up that it is a 100 gig quota for surveillance center, but the quota of recording space total is 500, and once a capacity limit is hit, it will start recycling over the oldest recordings. You can tinker with that, but there's loads of options. You can even utilise the Dr. Asustor Drive Health Management here, which is a nice little touch there, quite unique to the brand. Finally, you've got maintenance, and unsurprisingly, this is if you want to basically back up a lot of your configuration or storage so you can replicate this setup or retrieve it as needed. In the log section, it will tell you when things have been changed and user activity and online users, localized users and more. So if there has been an intrusion or you suspect there has been a manipulation of your recordings, this is where you will find it, and only admins can really play with those settings at all. And of course, then we can take a quick look at the cameras themselves. Adding a camera is incredibly straightforward. In this case, I've got those two cameras. If I was to add a camera, you would click add. You can either enter the information manually or search the local area network and it will do a scan. Upon then, it will find the camera and you'll be presented with a screen not unlike this. So if we select one of my cameras here, it will show you the IP, a lot of the protocol of the camera, and then you can enter your login information and then test that the camera's working, which it's going to do now while it just finds the camera there in the back end. This is probably one of my first early criticisms of the Asustor surveillance platform. I'm using this over the network. I think it could be a touch quicker. I'm not overly impressed by the speed of it. I think it could stand to pick up the pace the tiniest bit. But as you see there, you can double check that the camera's working, and from there you can set multiple streams. So you can create multiple tiered streams where you can have a low resolution stream and a high resolution stream. So if you are accessing these cameras remotely, you can access a kind of lower compressed version that maybe has a lower frame rate overall, lower picture quality perhaps, and some of the settings changed. So you can have the same camera running different kinds of stream for different users that have been connected. You can even change the recording schedule to motion detection, so it only records when motion is detected. A combination of continuous recording or alarm recording, or continuous motion and alarm recording. And you can change those settings really easy. You just draw a box and there you go. That means Monday to Friday from 2:30 to 11 o'clock, for example, in that box that I've just drawn, you would have those. And if you want to make amendments, real easy, delete it. It's that straightforward. Same goes for the advanced settings where you can change those storage limits. And if you have a camera that's got a PTZ, you can then set a patrol pattern of the camera whilst it's in motion so it can repeat an area and field of detection over and over again. It's that straightforward, and of course you can auto start recordings or let the recordings take care of themselves in the background. Now, the fact that you can't access these cameras with the same fluidity and the same control via the web browser is probably my second criticism. So far I like most of this. It does feel it does the job that it says it will, but the fact that you can't access the cameras via the web browser in the same meaningful way you can in the app is a little underwhelming. I know Synology have cracked this and QNAP have cracked most of it with QVR Pro, but given that they're the only two main competitors for NAS inclusive surveillance, that's not necessarily a bad thing. If we look at each of these cameras on the left hand side here, as you see, the one that we've got the higher resolution, we can move my hand and you can see there the camera on the right, I've lowered the resolution, I believe, to around 5 frames per second, whereas one on the left, I've kept a steady 25 frames per second. So these cameras, if we go into them individually, you can see that we can do a lot of control here. We can take the odd snapshot that will be saved to the local PC as you see fit. On top of that, you can click home to go back to the main layout of settings. You can do a zoomed area of check. So we go here. And boom, it's then going to zoom in on these areas for us. And again, we can zoom in as much as we like. On top of that, we can move along there, zoom up. And you can pinch zoom as well, like that. And you will be able to get those in. And of course, you can zoom back out whenever you need. Mute it, all those standard options that one would like. And then of course, you can always change those settings mid-recording. You can do a live recording now to save locally to your PC or system. And there's just lots of different options here. If you have multiple streams, you can open up different streaming profiles, so you can go back to those lower resolutions. And of course, you can take advantage of pan, tilt, zoom here, which again, you've got those controls there on the side if you want, or you can move the camera around, or you can zoom in using those controls, or you can get the camera to home back into where it began. There's lots of controls there that you may wish to take advantage of. And again, if we go back to the right camera, a non-pan tilt zoom camera, we can't change those options too much, but you've still got a good level of control overall. And again, as you can see there, with the non-pan tilt zoom camera, we don't have the arrows, where on this one, we have those options built in as well. I'm not going to play too much with those pan tilt zoom settings, because we will need to use these settings for when we do the mobile overview shortly. And again, on the right hand side, we've pretty much got all of those controls. We can change the layout in a number of ways, or if you've got multiple cameras, you can change it. But of course, because we don't have lots of cameras, we can't really do that. You can clone some of these cameras into other sequences, other layouts. The sequence button, if you're going to be running a single monitor as a standalone setup, you can have it so one screen will flick between each camera one by one. It will then obviously prioritize an alert camera over any of the others, and you can change the settings there. There's even changing between different cameras there at the bottom. These are all the options available, and of course at the bottom you've got the usage there happening in real time too. Now the playback settings here allow you to access the recordings for any of these cameras. So in the case here, we can scroll to the bottom and we can play back some of these cameras in real time while I was preparing for this video here. As you see there, we can scroll along, we've got lots of different options there. And right now, this is not me talking. I'm going to turn to the camera. I know you guys can't see it, but this is just some of the recordings we were doing earlier on. And again, while we're doing this, the system is still going to be recording with those cameras there in the back end in real time. So while I wave there at the camera, we can go back to playback. And we've still got those playback and recordings. And those recordings are kept for as long as you need them, and with those recycling settings. And you can speed up playback as well, or just go to where alerts happen on the timeline, or go to the export where you want to export certain areas of storage. You can do that option as well. And remember that on the NAS itself, if we log back in here on the screen, we can go into the recording settings of File Explorer, and from there go into the surveillance option, and our recordings will all be available to us there, all time stamped, already available. And there's our recordings right there. And of course, this camera being quite high end, recording MKV, but you can adjust those settings in each of the individual cameras. So what we're going to do now is we're going to make the switch over to the mobile app now. We're just going to leave that live view there on screen, and what I might do is just leave that there running in the background while I make my way into the mobile app. So the mobile app here, I've got the screen recording started. I'm just going to click that off there, make my way into it while we do that, and you can see me there on camera. And hopefully now we should be making the switch over to the mobile app now. I'm going to hold the camera up, and there we are. So from this point, I'm going to be making my way into the AiSecure application, a completely free app from iOS and Android. And as you see there on screen, I've already found this NAS there on the listing. And as we can see there, there are our two cameras. Now, we can change a number of those settings. And just to let you know, this is happening in real time. I'm just going to bring that camera over to there. Nice and simple. So again, we have got those different frame rates being displayed via the mobile application that is telling us about it. I'm just going to get closer to the mic there. And again, we have those same kind of manner of controls there. We've got the options of pan, tilt, zoom if we like. We can go into each of the individual cameras. We can select the pan, tilt, zoom option there, and it will rotate them around. We can take a photo, which will be saved to our local phone that we're utilizing here. We can activate zoom. We can pinch zoom as well if we so choose, or we can take advantage of the optical zoom that's built in. And we've got the options of muting, we've got the options all along the top that allow us to configure our view of this camera. On the side panel there, we have got all the different options that we had there on the desktop platform, from viewing events that have been triggered by the camera over time. The live view we've just looked at, that's got that view of each of the individual cameras. The playback option, allows us to look at the recordings that we've achieved over time. We can scroll through and find recordings that we've made in the past for each of those cameras. And then on top of that, we've got the individual camera control where we can deactivate cameras as we see fit or check the health of existing cameras. And then of course we can go to the settings menu to look at some of the default options that this app has that we can change. Everything from the transcoding, where if you are using devices where the video feed is too high a quality, you can play with those settings there. And then of course there are other options there in the background which allow us to configure our surveillance setup, quite well. I'm not going to say this is the most enterprise level tool I've used for surveillance. I think it's very, very good, and certainly the fact that it's included in the Asustor package is very, very impressive. Before we make the switch over to the HDMI interface, which we'll just look at in a little bit of detail, I will highlight that the cameras being displayed on here, these Reolink cameras, the Asustor platform does support pretty much all of them, and we've seen a good degree of support overall, I think, across all of the platforms of these Reolink cameras. But I got more of them working on the Asustor, and I do think that's one thing I will give them to their credit. But let's make the switch over to the HDMI platform now and see how that looks for you guys if you're going to use this for standalone surveillance. Okay, so we've set up the HDMI standalone setup and we are utilizing the Asustor AR remote control application here, available for iOS and Android, and we've connected this monitor here to the Asustor so we can see the surveillance setup. So once you've installed that surveillance application that we've talked about so far, it appears here on the HDMI interface. Bear in mind you don't have to use the mobile app here. You can utilize many other standard IR and Bluetooth remote controls that have a dongle, as well as numerous keyboard and mice that you can connect in a KVM setup. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into the surveillance app now. I'm having a look here, and as you can see here on screen, I'm tucked here just behind the camera, as you can see there at the top right. And if I go through, I can cycle through some of these options. So right now, if we go down to the right camera here, we can have a look, and I can look there and wave at the camera in the vain hope that this is coming across there on screen. And again, we've got all of the options you would expect. And with the remote control app, we can switch to a keyboard and mouse setup. We can go ahead and look at some of the configuration options if we choose, and we can go into each of the cameras pretty straightforward and easily that allow us to control these cameras. Now, if we have a look at the options menu, we can look at recordings, we can look at some of the previous stuff that's been done, we can even lower some of the resolution of some of the recordings we're looking at, and from here we can then go into a camera like so. Not quite as intuitive as I would like. We can right click and change the streams if we choose. We're not going to be doing that. And from there we might want to look at pan tilt zoom options. As we see, this is the pan tilt zoom camera. So what we want to see right now is pan tilt zoom control. Now, unfortunately, I would have liked to have seen those pan tilt zoom controls there happening in real time. Unfortunately, that hasn't happened with the up, down, left, right. So that's a bit of a shame there. If we go into the settings at the top once again and scroll on our way up, we can have a look at some of these options here. But again, I do think a lot of these are just flicking through existing cameras and not the control I would like. Now, playback is a slightly different story. We've got a much better grasp of control here on those recordings from earlier. So when we were stationed at the table earlier on, and we can flick between these cameras during that time period if we choose. So we can flick between them and look at the recordings like so. So this is from camera 1. So that was some of the recordings and the rabbiting I was doing there earlier on screen. And it's nice to know we can at least access the backlog quite easily in the archive of recordings. But at the same time, I do feel it's the level of control here we have is not quite as good as one might like utilising this mobile control setup. Of course, could have used the keyboard and the mouse, but I don't think we would have seen a vast amount of difference here in terms of what we're seeing here on screen. And ultimately, this is the overview you're going to get. It's still going to be quite useful to be able to see those recordings, but it is arguable that this level of control on the HDMI output is not matching that of the laptop and the mobile that we've tested so far. It's easy to come out and go back in like that, but I think we would have liked to have seen a little bit more areas of control in the surveillance platform. Still very, very good as an application that is included for free. Or I say for free, bundled in with the inclusive applications available on the Asustor NAS platform. And you've got to give them credit for these recording screen here, because it's very, very detailed. It tells me everything I need. It's very intuitive. You've got the ability to change those playback speeds quite easily. You've got the date control there as well, and the ability to export. But I do think a number of those areas of control could have been implemented a little bit better here on this screen, where we're not really getting any of those options that we had before. The ability to change streams is, fair and well, but I would have liked something a little bit more than that. But let's end it there. Thank you so much for watching, guys. I hope you guys have found this video helpful in some way. And if you are considering getting yourself an Asustor NAS, I recommend checking out the links in the description, obviously. But also, if you are looking for any NAS solution, you can always contact me via the myriad of means below and take advantage of a lot of the free help and guides I offer. But click like if you've enjoyed this video, click subscribe to learn more, and I will see you next time.